Thank you, John. Professor Briggs, ladies and gentlemen. Even if I can't be out here permanently, John, it's good to get out once in a while and get away from the bureaucracy in Washington. I must say, after making that reference to the bureaucracy, that I really like Washington. I find it an exciting place. It's more than the political center of the United States. In many ways, it's the political pulse of the world, and being close enough to it to feel this pulse is, at least for a young person, a very exciting and stimulating thing. In spite of the fact that I like Washington, I've never quite adjusted to the bureaucracy. There are a number of stories told about bureaucracy. Since I don't consider myself a bureaucrat, at least not yet, I don't mind telling these stories myself. There was one story, and this sort of illustrates just how far things can go in the bureaucracy when you get really dedicated bureaucrats. Someone, we just, I don't know how many tons of paper we must move around Washington each day, but it's pretty sizable. And, the paper comes in one box of the desk and goes out on the other, and it just keeps going, and you have to initial all these things. And one day, a piece of paper got on someone's desk by mistake, and he initialed it, and it went out, and then, lo and behold, shortly someone found that it had come to the wrong person. He wasn't supposed to initial it. So it came back with a note saying, "Please erase your initials and initial the erasure." I think there's a real tendency in this country today where the farm population is becoming increasingly small for the American people to take agriculture for granted. There are relatively few people who are really interested in American agriculture and supporting it. And this is one of our problems. One of these people, I might add, is a South Dakotan, one well known to you, and that's Senator McGovern. Senator McGovern is one of the few people in Washington, other than some of us in the department, who is really interested in American agriculture and is effectively representing it both at home and also in an international context. I was talking with Joe Floyd coming in today from Minneapolis, and we were talking about some of the things that Senator McGovern has been doing. And Joe reminded me that Senator McGovern has had an article in Look magazine just a few issues back, and we discovered that the senator and I had another thing in common, apart from a very deep interest in the world food problem. We both had been in recent issues of Look magazine. He was in the last issue of Look magazine that carried the final chapter of the Manchester book, and I was in the first issue of Look magazine that carried the first serialization of the Manchester book, both because of our interest in the world food problem. In talking about North America's emergence as a breadbasket, I think we probably speak too often in generalizations and not often enough in specifics. When we talk about the world food problem and about North America's emergence as the breadbasket, we're talking about a region which is now supplying from 85 to 90% of all the food entering world trade channels. And this has not always been the case. 30 years ago, there were 3 important grain exporting regions. I'm going to use a half dozen numbers here to illustrate this. North America was exporting 5 million tons of grain per year. Latin America was exporting 9 million tons of grain per year. Eastern Europe, including the Soviet Union, was also exporting 5 million tons per year. North America was one of 3 exporting regions, and not the leading one at that time. Contrast that, the late 1930s, with 1966. Latin America in 1966 was scarcely self-sufficient in grain. Imports into Brazil and other smaller countries were largely offsetting those from Argentina. Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union imported 14 million tons of grain in 1966. North America went from the 5 million ton export level of the late 1930s to 60 million tons in 1966. 60 million tons. North America today has a near monopoly on the world's exportable food supplies. I'd like to talk a bit about some of the factors that have brought this about. And I'm going to select a few that I think are quite important. The first of these I would describe as the forces identified by Malthus. Malthus, as most of you recall, was an English clergyman who in 1797 published a book on the trends in food and population growth, and simply stated, he said that population would tend to increase geometrically and food production arithmetically, and that population would press hard against food supplies in the future. It turns out that he was right, probably even more right than he had thought. The less developed countries are not performing poorly in agriculture. If you look at the rates of increase in food production in the less developed regions, they are very similar to those in the more developed regions in North America and in Europe. Perhaps I can best illustrate this by contrasting Western Europe and Latin America. Both regions have expanded food production about 2.5% per year. In Western Europe, where population grows at 1% per year, this is progress. Diets have been improving steadily. But in Latin America, where population increases at more nearly 3% per year, this is not progress. The difference is not in performance in agriculture. The difference here is in population growth. A population that grows 3% yearly doubles in a century and doubles within a generation and multiplies 18 times in a century. 18 times in a century. That's simply compounding a 3% annual rate of increase. The question is not, will population growth be slowed, but how? Will it be slowed by declining birth rates, or will it be slowed by eventual food shortages and rising death rates? These are the only two alternatives. It has to be one or the other. Population cannot continue to expand at present rates indefinitely.